Today we're going to talk about a topic that's been all the buzz lately, lost media. But first, what is a lost media? For those who don't know, lost media is audiovisual content that has become inaccessible or impossible to locate. It may have been deleted, lost, or destroyed, or never released to the public. This includes movies, TV shows, music, games, and recorded events, defining lost media as anything that once existed but is no longer available in its original format. There are all kinds of lost media out there on the internet, including games for various consoles that were cancelled or that were so heavily altered during development that what was released ended up being something else entirely. In this video, we'll focus on lost media related to PlayStation 2 games. But before we start the video, let's talk about our sponsor, Stone Age Gamer. For the best retro game accessories and consoles, including totally personalized ones like this beautiful PlayStation 1 right here, Stone Age Gamer is the best choice. And for orders over $75, you'll get $10 off with the coupon Mr. Vegas 10. Don't miss out. Click the link in the description below for the best retro game experience. Taxi Driver is a 1976 film directed by Martin Scorsese and starring Robert De Niro. This film was acclaimed, having won several awards at the time. So, in the early 2000s, two things happened that were important for this project to get started. The first was a game, which you may be familiar with, called Grand Theft Auto 3, which was released in 2001. This game is a masterpiece. It's basically redefined the whole sandbox genre. At the time, there were a bunch of licensed titles based on old movies being created. For example, Rockstar Games released The Warriors, which was based on the 1979 movie, and EA released The Godfather, a 1972 movie, which was also made into a sandbox game. So, what did the producers think? Hey, why don't we make a Taxi Driver game too? The game was announced in 2005 as a direct sequel to Martin Scorsese's masterpiece. Majesco Entertainment was the responsible for developing the game, and Papaya Studio to distributed it. The game was designed as an open-world sandbox set in 1970s New York. The player would control Travis Bickle, driving a taxi to earn money and finance his personal vigilante crusade. The most unique mechanic that had been created was the stress meter. Travis accumulated stress when witnessing crimes or injuring innocent people. If the meter exploded, the character would enter a state of psychosis, forcing the player to restart the mission. But despite being 75% complete, the project was abruptly cancelled due to the direct interference of Martin Scorsese. Yes, the king of absolute cinema himself. He was pretty upset by the idea of his introspective neo-noir film being turned into a frenetic shooting game focused on violent execution. Scorsese reportedly told Sony Pictures that he'd never license any more films for adaptations if this game was released. Majesco was also facing a financial crisis, so without the money to fight a legal battle with Scorsese or to finish the game, Majesco canceled Taxi Driver in January 2006. Papaya Studio, the game's publisher, even sued the developer for breaking the contract, but was never able to find a new partner to publish such a controversial title, marked by the rejection of its own creator. We only have screenshots and gameplay videos from the game, which are shown in the background, but unfortunately it never had a build released on the internet. Based on the acclaimed 80s movie franchise called Gremlins, the French developer Light and Shadow Productions acquired the rights to release games for it from Warner Bros. In 2001. The company achieved relative success with the franchise handheld games, releasing Gremlins Unleashed for Game Boy Color in 2001 and Gremlins Stripe vs. Gizmo for Game Boy Advance in 2002. However, the home console adaptation known as Gremlins or Gremlins Revenge was cancelled. LSP first announced the game on April 15, 2003 for the GameCube and PlayStation 2. Initially, it was only scheduled for release in Europe, rather than the expected approach for the intellectual property, which would naturally fit into the 3D platformer genre. LSP designed the game as a tactical shooter based on squads. This choice was directly influenced by the high demand for squad-based tactical action games at the time, such as Conflict Desert Storm, Freedom Fighters, and Full Spectrum Warrior. So it was that type of game that players could use the buttons on the PlayStation 2 controller to issue positioning and attack orders to their allied soldiers. The story was set 20 years after the events of the two original films. Kingston Falls City comes together to honor Gizmo and Billy for saving the town in the past. However, a leaking sewer pipe spills water on Gizmo, leading to the creation of a new gremlin named Stripe. The game would have two distinct campaigns. The player could choose to lead the resistance of Gizmo's Mogwai allies or command the destructive Stripe's army. The game's single-player content was split into two different modes: an adventure mode in which the stages would be played in a linear order as the events of the game's plot took place, and a quick action mode where players could select any stage in any order, with plans also being made for a cooperative multiplayer mode. And what happened to it? Well, this was never confirmed, but one theory is that it was yet another case of a developer going bankrupt. The development of Gremlins Revenge was completely halted in 2004 when LSB merged with the publisher Hip Games, affiliated with Titus Software. The corporate restructuring and the severe debts accumulated by the companies made it impossible to continue financing the project. It's sad to notice that to date, a game's prototype has not been made available to the public, with only leaked screenshots and the game's opening cutscene being all that has surfaced from it. This is one of the most interesting examples of lost media on the PS2. Can you imagine Halo, the symbol of the Xbox brand, running on a PS2? And it doesn't stop there, it would have been published by none other than Rockstar Games. But first, we need to talk a little bit about the history of Bungie, the developer studio founded in 1991 that became famous at the time for its PC games, particularly with the Marathon and Myth franchises. So, being a new and small developer studio, it was obvious they would need help from other companies to keep their costs manageable. And that happened in the late 90s, when Take-Two Interactive acquired 20% of the company. And well, you probably know that Take-Two also owns Rockstar Games and several other famous companies, right? So, this led to the release of a game called Oni in the early 2000s for the PlayStation 2, which was developed by Bungie and published by Rockstar Games itself. So it was obvious that with this partnership, other games would also be released on the platform. In 1999, Bungie officially announced its new project, Halo Combat Evolved, which at the time was set to be released originally for PC and Macintosh. However, in the first half of the 2000s, something happened that would change the gaming industry forever. Microsoft completed its acquisition of Bungie, making Halo an exclusive title for the Xbox and putting an end to any plans for a release on rival platforms. In exchange, Take-Two retained the rights to two game franchises created by Bungie, Oni, and Myth. So why we assume that a PS2 build actually existed at some point? Well, because there's supposedly a gameplay video of it. Keep in mind that none of this has been confirmed, but for some reason, there's an official IGN video on YouTube showing a Halo gameplay taken from a gaming website called GameStars German, and the video's title is literally Halo Combat Evolved PlayStation 2 Gameplay. So everything I've said here is unconfirmed, but considering that at the time Take-Two owned a stake in the company, I think they would have indeed considered making a port for the PS2 before it became an Xbox exclusive. Obviously, to this day we only have this single video to confirm it, since no further information about this version of the game has ever been leaked. Did you know that George Andrew Romero, the famous director of zombie movies, once worked on an ambitious first-person shooter horror game called City of the Dead? It was said to be a revolutionary experience, but it disappeared. The game was developed by a studio called Hip Interactive and was announced on the 2005's E3 for PS2, Xbox, and PC. They even made an agreement with George Romero himself to produce not only this game, but a series of games based on his films. City of the Dead was supposed to be the first one to release. The game was set to take place on a fictional island called Ningún Futuro. There, military chemical tests on corpses triggered a mass zombie apocalypse. The story follows 4 survivors whose helicopter crashes on the island, potentially linking it to the Dawn of the Dead movie, since the 2004 film ends with a group of survivors stranded on an island. Some have speculated that the island was actually the same one, linking the game to the film. The game would reportedly play similarly to Left 4 Dead, in which you and 3 others must wade through hordes of zombies. There would also be a split-screen co-op mode and an online multiplayer mode in which you could play as either a human or a zombie. In co-op mode, there was even a mechanic where if a player was bitten, their teammate could choose to kill them immediately or wait for them to transform. Once the transformation occurred, the infected player would take control of the zombie in first-person view, and their new objective would be to hunt down and eat their former teammate's brain. Creepy, right? It's also worth noting that the game would have used the Havok physics engine, which was very advanced for its time. It could basically lead to deform objects and zombies in a very realistic way. One interesting fact is that Tom Savini, a makeup artist and regular actor in the Dead series, was announced to have provided the voice and likeness of a character named William Red McLean, who would become a playable character in the game. Despite a promising showing at E3 in 2005, the project was ultimately cancelled when HIP Interactive filed for bankruptcy in July 2005. What we have available from it today are the official trailer and a gameplay video, both from E3 2005. Did you know that Final Fantasy XIII, one of the most controversial titles in the iconic Square Enix franchise, almost ended up on the PS2? The development began in February 2004, shortly after the release of Final Fantasy X-2, under the codename Colors World. We can confirm this because a few images of this prototype leaked, revealing early concepts featuring simplified, cel-shaded graphics and styles reminiscent of Final Fantasy XII. However, in May 2005, the team made the important decision to shift the entire development to the PlayStation 3, utilizing the new Crystal Tools engine. This transition was a complete restart. Almost nothing from the PS2 version could be saved. Gameplay elements, battle systems, and graphic assets were discarded in favor of the new hardware's potential. So the only thing we have available from this build are a few images that were shown in a Japanese magazine. Unfortunately, we will likely never see this prototype appear online. We Are the Mods was an ambitious spiritual successor to Rockstar Games' cult classic, The Warriors. Developed by Rockstar Toronto, the project was intended to capture the same gang-based brawling essence of the original game, but instead of the movie-inspired setting of 70s New York, it would have moved the plot to the 60s England. The game aimed to immerse players in the British mods versus rocker subculture, a period defined by iconic clashes between youth groups on the beaches of coastal towns like Brighton, drawing inspiration from the aesthetics and tension captured in the 1979 film Quadrophenia, which even famously features the chant, "We are the mods." That would become the game's title. The project began around 2006 as a PlayStation 2 title. However, Rockstar Toronto eventually instructed the team to shift development to the Xbox 360. But unfortunately, Rockstar Toronto was redirected to focus their resources on Manhunt 2, which was viewed as a more commercially viable project at the time, and this game was never officially announced. Its existence only came to light in 2011, when an environmental artist who worked at the studio, Matt Kazan, posted in his portfolio 3D models of a period-appropriate props, such as 1960s automobiles and rifles. Have you heard of any of these PS2's lost medias? Do you know of any other games that never existed? Share your thoughts in the comments. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.